What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is.
To give us his views of where economic policy might be headed, welcome now Glenn Hubbard. He's Dean Emeritus at the Columbia Business School, and he was the chair of President George W. Bush's Council of Economic Advisors. He's also author of The Wall and the Bridge, Fear and Opportunity in Disruption's Wake. So, Dean Hubbard, thank you so much for being back with us.
My pleasure.
Really wanted to talk to you because there is this question, where do we go from here? I mean, we don't yet know exactly what happened with the midterms. We've got a pretty good hunch. Probably a narrow majority for the Republicans in the House. Quite possibly the Democrats will hold a 50-50 sort of split in the Senate. What should Republicans do? If you're up on Capitol Hill, is there a sustainable economic policy for growth they could pursue?
I think there is, and in fact, there's a pivot for the president too. You know, listening to him just now reminds one of the aphorism of learning nothing and forgetting nothing. It's time for a pivot. And I think for Republicans, GOP is instructive, growth, opportunity, and participation. There's a way to develop bridges, to take people, take communities, take more people to the economy that will be in the future. We've done this before in the country. We can do it again. And it doesn't have a partisan label. Anybody could grab it, but it's especially apt for the GOP.
So let's talk about walls and bridges, which you wrote about in your book. It strikes me, and maybe I'm not being careful enough in listening to it, I hear a lot more about walls and bridges, I think, these days. A lot more about protecting against change, perhaps both on the Democrats and the Republicans, than about how do we embrace change and get ready for it.
You do. I mean, if you start with the growth part, change is important. There is no model or theory of growth that doesn't involve change. So we need change. The question is, how do you bring everybody along? And that's what we hadn't been doing so well in the past few decades. Populism embraces that, and we need to address it. And so to do that, you really have to help individuals with training and education. You have to help communities to bring people along.
Can we afford to do it? Because
sure.
We don't have zero interest rates anymore.
Oh, sure. In the book, I outline everything from community college block grants to aid to communities to reform of the earned income tax credit to support work. All of that is probably about $100 billion a year. That's real money. But compared to what we've been doing, compared to student loan relief alone that was $400 billion at a stroke of a pen, we can afford to do this.
You mentioned earned income tax credit. A lot of people think that that's a good reform that could be pursued. What about the child tax credit? Because that's something the Democrats badly want. They wanted to put through. Republicans don't like it so much. Is that a constructive thing to allow people to re-enter the workforce in a positive way?
I think it could be, and it's part of what could be a compromise package. You know, if you want to allow more people to come back to work, you have to loosen all constraints on work. And I think the child tax credit could play a very powerful role there if it's accompanied by rewarding work, which is what the earned income tax credit could do very well.
Well, what about that point specifically? As I understand it, at least, one of the issues for Republicans is if you're going to give these breaks, you should actually sort of require work. It should be conditioned upon getting to work rather than just giving people the money. Is that right?
It should be, but that's a feature, not a bug, in the sense that participation in the economy brings dignity, it brings honor, and it brings support for the economic system. So that ought to be one of our goals. The question is really supporting work and making work pay. The EITC, or an income tax credit, among other things, can do that.
So, as I understand from you economists, there are two ways to grow. One is more people working, and the other is more productivity. Ideally, you get both of those. Talking about more people working, some of them are living in the United States right now. What about immigration? Is there a way to really address immigration, which has really divided the parties? It's a problem we have to address at some point in a way that would actually give us more people constructively in the workforce.
It's super important. Immigration has always been one of America's great strengths. And the immigration story is really two parts in policy. One is about very high-skilled immigration. And there should be no doubt. We should want every scientist, doctor, business person, entrepreneur in the world who wants to be here should be here. The political debate over low-skilled immigration is harder. But rather than saying no to low-skilled immigration, how about yes to training support and helping more people come along? I think that would ease the political dilemma.
Have we ever done that training support well? And by the way, should it be private sector or public sector or a combination of both?
The truth is we have. So if you think back to the 19th century, the whole land-grant college movement, which I build on for community colleges, is exactly that. The GI Bill with President Franklin Roosevelt after the Second World War. We have done this. And yes, it should have heavy involvement of the private sector. Throughout the country, we've got great partnerships of business people with community colleges, with communities, because they know where the jobs are. One size fits all from Washington, less efficient.
Other issues like productivity, there are ways to address that.
Yes.
And by the way, go back to the Trump tax cuts. Was that an effective way to deal with productivity by giving certain tax credits for investment? Did it work?
Well, I think it did. Unfortunately, trade policy went the other way and created uncertainty and diminished investment. But yes, a pro-investment tax policy is a big deal. But it's not the only thing. For example, we need to be spending much more on basic research in the country so that we keep our lead and our competitive advantage in new science and new technologies. And I think we could profitably put applied research centers around the country, again, drawing on the land-grant college model, to help local businesses in local areas compete better.
Did the CHIPS Act, which I think I folded into the Inflation Reduction Act, I get confused on the names sometimes, was that a good step in that direction, basically, because I think there was a fair amount of money toward basic research, wasn't there?
The basic research parts, yes. I worry that parts of the act look a little more like corporate welfare for me. What I would prefer to see is much more on the front end for research and then allow businesses to figure it out, which they will do.
One of the fundamental walls, as it were, to use your term from your book, has been trade policy, protectionism, some would say. There was a time when, I think, sort of simply stated, Democrats tend to be more protectionist. They want to protect workers, including unionized workers. Republicans were more free trade. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
It's not, and it's a problem. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, trade is very good for the economy. Globalization gets the political rap. In fact, technological change has been far bigger than globalization in disrupting the workforce. But we need to address it. We need to help people cope with whether it's the China shock or other trade disruptions in the economy. Otherwise, we shouldn't be surprised when politicians say no to trade.
Right now, most people, I think they're observing and thinking we're going to have stasis up on Capitol Hill. It's going to be split. Nothing's going to get done. If it was possible to do something, what would it be? I mean, let's put you in charge and say you come up with your bill, one bill that you think would make a real difference. What would it be?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, what problem are you trying to solve? So if the idea is to bring more people along, greater opportunity, greater participation, I think it would be saying no to the student loan forgiveness and starting over with something like a big block grant for community colleges. Those are the foot soldiers of training people for the economy that will be, whether it's younger people or people who need retraining. I think massive support for work. Again, possibly combined with a child tax credit. These are things that, frankly, some years ago, both Paul Ryan, when he was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and Barack Obama, when he was president of the United States, both agreed.
Is progressive taxation a wall or a bridge? Because, again, oversimplifying, I think Republicans tend to say, let's cut taxes, including, and maybe especially for the more wealthy. Democrats say, let's raise taxes on the wealthier. Does it make a difference? Does that help address some of the underlying causes of populism?
Well, I think we will need some revenue given the nation's fiscal problems, and progressivity is important in the tax system. That said, if you want growth and opportunity and participation, you do need a tax system that's consistent with that. I think the failure to adapt to change is what's led to populism and tax policy that has not been that welcome in the business community.
I won't necessarily ask you to name names, but are there people who have this vision who are active in politics today? You mentioned, for example, Paul Ryan. He's not in the game anymore. Are there people that are sort of listening to you and people like you?
I think there are many governors and senators who have ideas like this and have long had ideas like this. After all, everything that I'm talking about once was in the center of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan, when he reassembled a coalition, effectively did that on growth and opportunity and participation.